Hey, this is Eric from Catching Light.
Hey, this is Hemp.
Hey, this is Glenn.
Hi, I'm Steve-O.
Hey, this is Drew Hines with Hindsight Imagery.
This is Matt Callahan at Digimatty Photographic Services.
Hey, this is Jason, and welcome to Tales from the Pit. Hello and welcome to Tales from the Pit, the behind-the-lens access for concerts and photography. Today we have a legendary special guest, Mr. Lou Brutus. Lou, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Great to be here. I hope you guys are doing okay through the rather weird holiday season we seem to be having.
Yeah, we're doing all right.
It's bizarre, that's for sure. Usually we get started with some sort of history of how you got in the industry. Could you kind of give us a little bird's eye view of how you got started in the industry?
Sure. I mean, I know you guys primarily talk about photography, but my first real introduction has been through my radio work and my music media work. And, I began on a college radio station, Brookdale Community College in Lincroft, New Jersey. We called it UCLA, to the university closest to the Lincroft area. But they had a great radio station and a great radio program. And I was there and I lucked into an internship at what is still one of the biggest rock stations in the United States, WMMR in Philadelphia. It was kind of cool because where I grew up in Central Jersey, Englishtown, kind of the middle of nowhere, but it was only an hour to New York and an hour to Philadelphia. So we got great radio stations, rock radio stations from Jersey, New York, and Philly. We were also within an hour of all of these different concert markets. So I could, one night be at Madison Square Garden or the Palladium in New York City, or at the Capitol Theater in Passaic, New Jersey, or Convention Hall in Asbury Park, or the Spectrum, or the Tower Theater in Philadelphia. So by the time I was like 13, 14 years old, I was attending several concerts a week. And I've been working multiple jobs since I was a kid, mostly early on, just so I could support my concert habit. And I managed to see a whole lot of the greats when I was just a little kid. So anyway, I progressed into the radio thing. And from there, through my many years doing radio, and it's 40 years, I think, since I started my internship at MMR. I'm now with Sirius XM going on 20 years. And of course, my nationally syndicated show, the weekend edition, hardDrive, we're doing that. It will be 25 years come 4th of July, should we make it that far. And we have a weeknight companion show to it, 5 days a week tonight, hardDrive XL, and that's on like 40 to 50 radio stations around the country. So it was through that I started to get access to do photography, and that includes not only the music related stuff that I do a lot of, but I've been an on-field Major League Baseball photographer for the last 10 or 11 years, and as a big Mets fan, as you can see, that's a lot of fun. A funny thing that comes out of that, by the way, before we really get started here, is when I'm traveling with a band, they're like, dude, what are you doing here? You've seen us 100 times. You could be at Yankee Stadium taking pictures of the Yankees. And then I'll be like, shooting the Mets and the Nationals. And the ball players will be like, dude, what are you doing here again? You could be out with Metallica or the Rolling Stones right now. What are you doing here with this crap? Everybody thinks the other guy has the cooler gig. So Anyway, that's an overview. And of course, earlier this year, I put out my memoir, Sonic Warrior, My Life as a Rock and Roll Reprobate, Tales of Sex, Drugs, and Vomiting and Inopportune Moments. And that is filled with sort of colorful anecdotes from the rock bands and all the music stuff that I've done, going back to when I'm a kid. So, yeah, I don't sleep. I just work 7 days a week.
I'm tired now, club soda.
Yeah. The book, I purchased the audio book just to hear it through your perspective, because when I read it, I obviously was hearing your voice. I was like, well, why not just actually hear your voice? So the book actually has so many crazy stories I'm sure we'll talk about them in a little bit. And I highly recommend the audiobook just because of the way you deliver some of your stories in general. But I'd like to go back a little bit and sort of talk. You kind of gave us real brief how you got into radio, but tell us how you got involved with photography. It seems like you were the right person at the right place, but was photography already a passion, or you just picked it up because you had to?
You know, it's kind of weird the way it progressed, because the first time I got like what I would consider a real camera was in the mid 1990s, and I was living and working in Chicago, which is it's the great American city. I've always been interested in lighthouses. I love visiting lighthouses, and my wife had gotten me a couple of like Barnes and Noble coffee table books, pictures of lighthouses kind of thing, get them in the bargain bin for $5, and they're filled with really beautiful, pictures of lighthouses. And I thought, man, I really want to learn how to take pictures like that. So I ended up with a Canon EOS Rebel film camera, pre-digital. There were digital cameras around by then, but nothing really worth owning. I started taking pictures of lighthouses, which I'd started a little bit before that, but this is the first time I got what I would consider a real camera. And from there, it sort of progressed. I got a digital camera a few years later that was a Nikon D50. And I just wanted to take better lighthouse pictures. But then sometimes I would take the camera to concerts. And some of the artists that I knew fairly well, that I had good rapport with, started offering me, slots in the pit. And, being the dumbass I am, I'm like, nah, I don't feel like doing that. Nah, it's too much work. And frankly, I didn't think the equipment was quite that good enough. And I had no idea really how to do that kind of photography. It was challenging enough for me to take pictures of lighthouses, and you're out in the middle of the day and it's very well lit, so it's a relatively easy thing to do. But it was on, I think, the first, I want to say, Stone Sour tour, and I had brought a camera just to, backstage shots, hey, here's a picture of us getting an interview together and that kind of thing. And I think it may have been Jim Root who was like, dude, take some fucking pictures. Just go out of the fucking pit whenever you want. Just take pictures. And so I did. And a few of them, miraculously, even though I had no clue what I was doing in terms of shooting concerts, I shot a lot. Physically a lot of pictures, and a few of them, and I mean a few of them, came out okay. And I sent them to the guys in the band, and I thought, wow, this is really kind of cool. I would like to learn how to do this better. So I did some reading and kind of looked at the formulas for how people shot and their settings and all that. And then I tried to be very tenacious about it and learn as quickly as I could, and really devoted a lot of my what little extra time I have to learning it. A few years after that, I started going to see a lot more baseball games, and I always and this ties into the photography thing. I'll come back around to it, but I've always followed my Mets very closely. I always kid people, there are only three things I need in life: my family, music, and baseball. But the season after my dad passed away, I really dove back into baseball like I had not since I was a little kid. And I mean, I was looking at the stats every day in the newspaper, and basically following pitch by pitch, which I found out later is a fairly common reaction to losing the last of your parents. People look for something that sort of fills the void and has been with them their entire lives. And for a lot of people, very common, they really dive into baseball. So that season, I think this would have been the 2007 season, I started going to a lot of games, and through various connections, like for Nationals games, I usually was able to get in the first or second row. And my cousin Tommy, who's a really funny guy, one of the most charismatic people that I know. And one of my best friends since, we're 4 or 5 years old. My cousin Tommy is really plugged in. And I mean, White House, Congress, Senate, the Pope. Like, I'm not making this up. My cousin is plugged in at all levels on this planet. So anyway, my cousin had season tickets to both the Mets and the Yankees. And a couple of times we went to see the Mets up at Shea Stadium. And we end up like in the first couple of rows. Well, I bring my Nikon D50 out, and they're day games. They're really well lit. I ended up with some really good pictures. And again, you don't need pro level stuff to shoot baseball if you're that close. You just need lots and lots of light. For people who might be new to photography, when you see somebody at a baseball game or a football game and they've got the bazooka sized ginormous lens, that is not necessarily getting you the magnification that you cannot get on what you would buy at like Best Buy, but it allows you to get that sort of magnification and freeze the action in low light. Those lenses are ginormous because they're giant light buckets. And the more light that you can get in like a night game, the easier you can freeze the action. But for these day games, it was very easy for me to get really sharp, cool pictures. So I put a couple of them up in my Sirius XM office. And it was XM at that time. This is pre-merger with Sirius. And a fellow by the name of Chuck Dickman was the baseball programmer and liaison for us with Major League Baseball at that time. And Chuck, he and I are still friends. He's a great guy. He sees the pictures and he goes, "Man, these are great. Where did you get these?" And I said, I took them. These are my pictures. And he said, "Hey, I got a question for you. Would you go shoot baseball for us? Because we need baseball images. I can get you on the field for any game, anywhere Major League Baseball." And I'm like, Jesus, is there more than one answer to that question? Because I'm pretty sure that yes is the only one.
That sucks.
So I end up, I know, and just as a baseball fan, down on the field, you're like, "Can I curse with you guys? Is it okay?" I'm like,
yeah.
Holy fuck. And, I end up shooting some Nationals games and some Orioles games. So I shoot a day game for the Orioles. And this is the first time I'm shooting. And I go to walk down into the first base pit, photo pit. And there's a guy who later became a friend, a great photographer by the name of Mark Goldman. Goldmine Enterprises or Goldmine Photography is his company. And he's a brilliant photographer, particularly with sports, and a really good guy. Big rock and roll fan, big Frank Zappa fan, big Tom Waits fan. Anyway, he's the first person I encounter as I'm walking into the pit, and I'm there hours before the game to kind of, find out what the hell I'm supposed to be doing. And I said, "Hey, my name's Lou Brutus. It's nice to meet you. Hey, it's my first game. Any pointers?" And he looked at me dead serious and said, "Know where the ball is at all times." And I like, "Hey, that's pretty fun." And he said, "Dude, see this?" And he points, and he had a V-shaped scar on his face. He said, "That was a Terry Pendleton line drive I took to my face. I was in a coma for 2 days. Dude, know where the ball is at all times." And that's when I sort of realized that, you really have to be on your toes. And I've gotten dinged. I mean, I've shot hundreds of baseball games, and I've gotten whacked a few times, nothing terribly serious. My friend Mitch Layton, who's another great sports photographer and had been team photographer for the Nationals for many years, we were shooting a game. I think it was the Nationals at the Orioles in Camden Yards. And he was facing the pitcher this way. The batter is over here, and a line drive foul crushed his hand in between the ball and the camera. Ooh. And the bones were sticking out of the end of his fingers and stuff. And it messed him up pretty bad. He's doing fine now. I mean, but he was in a lot of pain and had difficulty shooting, as you might imagine, for some weeks. So anyway, so that was the end of the 2007 season that I began to do that. And for the night games, I rented some equipment because I just knew I can't shoot night games with this crap I got, and I thought I really liked it. And
now?
Yes, I'm shooting Nikon since I picked up the D50.
Attaboy.
And part of that was I was very happy with the Canon EOS Rebel. It's a great camera, and those sort of lower level, like the not that they're bad cameras, but when you compare them to the pro level stuff, the EOS Rebel and the Nikon equivalent, those are really forgiving cameras, because if you put them on basic settings, the camera essentially knows what you want to do and does a fairly good job for beginning photographers. But then, of course, I realized I had to learn how to shoot manually, and I do everything everything is manual at all times, even in concerts, which is really, quite frankly, a pain in the ass. Excuse me, as you all know, especially when you get somebody like Rob Zombie, who, you know, if you're epileptic, and I'm not trying to be funny here, there's so many strobes and flashes and stuff, it's crazy, and the lights are changing every 10th of a second, you know. So anyway, just to wrap up, Chuck liked the pictures. I loved getting the pictures. So the following season, he got me a league level photographer's pass.
Jesus.
Good for any game, anywhere. Walk down on the field, go where you want. Don't phone ahead. Just walk in. And at that point, I knew I needed good cameras. So I got a pair of, was it Nikon D200s or 300s? At that point, and a bevy of, I got a 300 2.8 and a 70 to 200 2.8. And I knew I could shoot baseball with those. And then several years after that, I wanted to upgrade. So I got a pair of Nikon D4S, all new lenses again, the 300, the 24 to 70 to 70 to 200. I now use one kind of super wide angle. And I just got for my birthday the Nikon 8 to 15 full fisheye, which I've mostly so far been using for astrophotography. I'd like to shoot like the space station going overhead, and I just used it for the Geminid meteor shower and got some cool pictures with that. Actually, a space station picture I got a couple of months ago. I read up to see where the path was going to be, where the ISS was going to transit the moon. So I had the fisheye, so it's a 360 all the way around horizon. The moon is here, and the space station came from the middle of the frame and passed right over the moon. And it's like a 4-minute exposure. So the stars kind of move, but the moon stays in place pretty much. And the ISS is just a straight line across the entire frame. It's sort of a very specialized lens, but if you have particular things you can do with it, it's pretty cool. So anyway, that's how I ended up with sort of the fab gear, and more and more. Bands were just letting me come out and shoot, or inviting me to the photo pit. And, there's a number of bands that I travel with, and I'll get a bunk on the bus. And, that's the most fun. And then you just go out and shoot. And the good thing about that, the helpful thing about that is, once you go to a tour, if you go to 5 shows in a week, you know where the lighting cues are, you know who's going to be where at particular times. Those things change because everybody's moving around, but you have a general idea of the ebb and flow of the show, song to song. So if at this particular point, Randy from Lamb of God is going to do one of his frog leaps out to the stage left side, you can position yourself and get him coming right at, there's a million different things you can do. So sorry to ramble so much, but I'm filled with black coffee. So
no, we appreciate the stories. This is great information.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's nice to have someone with your access and your experience and all that stuff. It's really nice to hear your war stories. We're all venue photographers, so we've seen a wide variety of type of acts come through, but we're very limited on what we can do for those acts and what we can do for the venue. So it's nice to see your perspective on this as well. So really, really cool. Yeah.
I mean, for me, I've been going to concerts since I had just turned 14 years old. And actually the opening chapter of the book is entitled "The Time I Attended My First Concert and Threw Up on Carlos Sanchez." And my older sister Patty and her boyfriend at the time, Carlos Sanchez, took me to see Black Sabbath and Ted Nugent. And the chapter, the rest of the chapters are from my professional life, but this is sort of the setup autobiographical chapter. And I had the flu and really shouldn't have gone, but didn't want to miss my first concert. So I go to the show, and in the excitement, I think it would be a really good idea, flu and all, to down an entire bottle of Boone's Farm strawberry wine in one throw. Pass out, miss Black Sabbath, and wake up in time to leave and start power vomiting all over Madison Square Garden. Can I show you the illustration from it?
Please. Please.
Sure.
There's an illustration for each chapter, and it's done by my friend Alan McBain. And for folks who follow me and have followed my career, Alan does most of my graphic arts because you need to sort of have all sorts of physical presence, especially with online. So Alan and I have done a ton of things together. He's done album covers for my band Dead Schembecklers and Christmas card. Vomiting chapter, or this is one of the vomiting chapters. And there's me throwing up on Carlos's arm. You know, I've done readings from this chapter online. I do book readings from time to time since I haven't been able to do my book tour this year. Carlos has showed up on some of them, you know. So and I'll show you one other vomiting one. The chapters do not roll out in chronological order. It's like if we were at the bar hanging out and I was telling stories, they just come out every which way. The final chapter is about covering Live Aid as a kid. And crap, where the hell is it? It's my book. You think I'd be able to find this stuff? There's Robert Plant hitting on my wife, but that's not the... He really did.
How'd that go?
Your best friend,
fucking Robert Plant, hello, and she's like, and I'm looking like Joe the Dope, So anyway, the last chapter is the time I rained vomit down upon the biggest concert in history, and that's me puking out of the helicopter at Live Aid, and I literally puked on 100,000 people through the. It wasn't quite like Alan illustrated it. It was more of a little slit of a window, because you can't have big open windows in helicopters, apparently. So I had I started to puke on the inside of the helicopter. And let me tell you something about helicopter pilots. They don't like when you puke on the inside of their helicopters, especially because it was a glass nose helicopter. So I'm puking and like covering up the view, So anyway.
So do we mind if we talk about the book writing process a little bit?
Yeah, talk about whatever you want. Originally the book, I knew I wanted to write a memoir or memoirs and just filled with crazy rock and roll stories. There's one chapter in there, the time our tour bus ran over a guy on the New Jersey Turnpike. There's another chapter entitled The Time I Went to the Arctic and got in a mosh pit with a bunch of kids in polar bear fur while Metallica sang about sodomizing a goat. And that's about going with Metallica up to the Molson Ice Polar Beach Party in the Arctic, the Inuit village of Tuktoyaktuk. And they closed the set with, lyrically, it's a pretty heavy song. It's called So What? And it's by an old pub punk band called the Anti-Nowhere League. And they put it on their first Garage Days cover song EP. So anyway, I knew I wanted to write a book or books with all these kind of crazy, funny stories. I didn't want it to be a nasty book. And I certainly could have written about who
nasty book. You wrote about vomit.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't mind me looking bad in my own book or looking like a dope or I don't mind subjecting myself to that sort of thing in the book because it's all sort of funny and good natured. I did not want to write a book where, hey, I saw so-and-so cheat on his wife, or I saw this person shooting drugs, or and man, I'm doing this shit for 40 years. I've seen all sorts. I could do 10 of those books, but I don't want to be an asshole. I wanted to write a book that was kind of fun, but still gives people a very strong idea of what the music business and the rock and roll business is actually like behind the scenes. So hopefully I accomplished that. But originally I wanted to do a book before any sort of memoir thing of all of my concert music, but primarily concert memorabilia. Because again, I've attended more than 3,000. I say music events other than concerts because some of it is, I've hosted, I'll host an Artist Confidential with, God, I don't know, James Taylor, and he performs, but is that really a concert? Well, I wouldn't call it a concert, even though there's a small audience. So 3,000 music events, most of them being concerts. And I've kept pretty much every ticket stub, backstage pass, laminate, poster, set list. I've got stuff covered in signatures. I have, my loose estimate is over 10,000 pieces in the collection. If you count everything individually, all the stubs and guitar picks and everything else. And I would love to do a big coffee table book of all that with maybe little short paragraph explanation for each item or on each page. And I eventually I'll get that done, I hope. But for now, I've already outlined a second Sonic Warrior book because I left out a lot of stories. One chapter will be entitled "The Time I Turned Down a Private Audience with His Holiness Pope John Paul II in order to spend time with Ozzy Osbourne." And I was invited to a private lunch at the Vatican with Pope John Paul II, but I had to fly down to Texas to be with Ozzy at the opening of an Ozfest. Actually, and the invite came from my cousin, who I mentioned earlier, my cousin Tommy, who's been a guest at the Vatican, and he stays at the Vatican, and he said, "Hey, I got a surprise for you. I'm flying you to Rome in a couple of weeks. We're going to have lunch with the Pope." And I'm like, "Tommy, I got to go to Texas for Ozzy."
We need to meet Tommy.
So I turned down the trip. A quick addendum to that story. Years later, I go to shoot a game at Washington Nationals in DC because I have an office in DC, so I'm often in DC, and that's an easy place for me to go and shoot baseball. And my cousin is friends with a number of the Washington Nationals, so I get to the game that day. It was a Saturday afternoon, I think, and before BP, it's super early in the morning, and I get there, and my cousin's already down on the field, and he's talking to a priest. And, the priest is there. He gives a benediction or a prayer before the game for the players who want it. And so I walk up to my cousin. "Hey, Louie, hey, come here." We're all from Newark, New Jersey. "Hey, Louie, how you doing?" So my cousin calls me over and he says to the priest, "Hey, this is my cousin I told you about." And the priest looks at Tommy and then looks at me and he goes, and he looks back at Tommy. He goes, "This guy really exists? That's a true story?" And my cousin kind of just nods his head. And the priest looks at me. He goes, "You turned down an audience with His Holiness John Paul II for Ozzy?" And I went, "Yes, I did." And the priest just backs away, crossing me as he steps back. True, so honest to God, true story. And the priest was nice after that, but he definitely was just a bit standoffish after that. It was I think I freaked him out.
To go home and do 10 Hail Marys.
Oh yeah, I could hear my Catholic upbringing. I'm like, dude, even
I was waiting for him to, the power of Christ compels you.
Yeah, see,
power.
So when it comes to the book stuff, you've talked about how it got started, especially with the kick in the pants from Corey Taylor, sort of. I kind of want to know what the duration was from you finally getting it to it's published. What was that like? What's that process like? It
was just finding the time to do it, because between all of my broadcast stuff I do and all the traveling I do and the photography, trying to find time to write a book was a pain in the ass. But each time that I finally got to sit down to write, at least the preliminary versions of each chapter went fairly quickly, because all of these stories that are in the book, for example, like the story I just told you, it's not in the book, but I've told that story 100 times. So it was very much just me sort of narrating to myself what I needed to write. And that would be the first draft of the chapter. And then I would go in and tighten it up. And I might add some background facts like, you mentioned Corey. There's a chapter where I'm dressed as Hunter S. Thompson. I had shown up at the end of the Subliminal Verses tour in Madison, Wisconsin. Surprised the guys. Wanted to be there for the end of the tour. I'd been there when they were recording the record out in LA. and had been to dozens of shows on the tour and wanted to be there for the last one. And Corey and I and Clown too are big Hunter S. Thompson fans. Anyway, Corey wanted to prank Shadows Fall, who were the first band on that night. Lamb of God was also on the bill. So Corey, long story short, but you can read the chapter. Corey goes out almost buck naked, except around his privates, he's got a lot of duct tape wrapped, and he's got his mask on. So he goes out prancing like a pony with his pigtails bouncing right in the middle of Shadows Fall, one of their opening songs. And, this is the Alliant Energy Arena, and it's sold out. There's, like 10,000 people there, and they go crazy. And then from behind me, I'm standing off stage. Corey's wife at the time said, "Okay, Hunter, you're on." And she shoves me on stage after him. So again, I'm dressed head to toe like Hunter Thompson, got the glasses, cigarette holder, the fly swatter. So I start chasing after Corey and swatting at this enormous duct tape dong with the fly swatter. And we're out there probably only for a minute. It seemed longer at the time. And then the Wisconsin State Police showed up. And the rest of the story is about evading detection and arrest, because they were not happy. Apparently the government has some sort of hand or finger in the facility. I don't know, but there were state troopers there, and they apparently don't like naked people or people like Hunter Thompson interrupting the paid concerts. So that's
got to be on YouTube.
So actually here, you want me to find that? You want me to find that illustration? There's an illustration for you. And again, Alan does such a great job with the, well, here's the illustrator. I'll show you this one first. This is for the Molson Ice Polar Beach Party with Metallica up in Tuktoyaktuk. And that is, in fact, me and Courtney Love down at the bottom. Hole was one of the opening bands. And for longtime radio listeners of mine, the seal with the cigar, Alan threw him in for fun. I used to do a character on the air that was an alcoholic talking seal called Sammy the Seal. And Alan threw that in for fun. Let me get to this Corey chapter. Oh, here we go. The time I escaped the Wisconsin State Police and their fake phallus felony enforcement. And there's Corey and I on stage. There you go. There's your boy. Who wouldn't want to buy this book now, huh?
Should be the cover,
Gosh
right?
almighty. My mom and dad passed away years ago, as I said. And I miss them terribly. And my mother was an antique book dealer, and she and my dad were both avid readers. So they really would have gotten a charge out of the fact that I have my own book out. My Aunt Min, whom I love dearly, my mom's younger sister, she was very excited for the book coming out. And I said, okay, I'm going to send you a copy. And I put it in the mail. And I said to my Aunt Min, I'm like, now listen, you don't necessarily have to open it. You got the book. You can open the front. It's signed to you. I mention you in the thank yous and the acknowledgments at the end, but you might want to stay away from some of the stories and the illustrations. So, because she's not used to, to the best of my knowledge, she's never chased anybody around with a duct tape phallus with a fly swatter dressed as Hunter Thompson. So,
Oh my God.
We can't all live that kind of life.
Yeah, that's a pretty
thankfully
pretty crazy. Yeah. So with the book, so you I'm assuming you write all the stories, you send it to editors and they chop it up or something like that.
Yeah. I write and rewrite and get it to where I think it's supposed to be. Then it would go to the editor who says, hey, this part's good. I would change this grammatically. This is weird. And they did nips and tucks on it, but there wasn't any really sort of wholesale changes, because again, I've told the story so many times.
Right.
They came fairly quickly, and they're just sort of laid out where the story goes from point A to B to C to D. It's not like I'm writing a novel and I need to set up characters and subtext and all that. It's just like, hey, we got fucked up. I threw up on the bus, and and then we were at Live Aid, or whatever the story might be.
And your second, so the next book you have coming, how far along are you with that?
I've outlined it. So I've listed all of the stories that will go into it, all of the chapter titles, and then it's a matter of writing it. So I'm actually hoping over the holiday season to at least bang out the preliminary chapters, and I'll probably do the Pope John Paul Ozzy story. Another story I really should have put in the first book, but I didn't. I'm not sure the exact chapter name yet, but something to the effect of the time Eddie Van Halen named his band after me.
Yep.
And that was about the Lou Brutus Experience, which Eddie Van Halen put a charity gig band together for Jason Becker, great guitar shredder and a dear friend of Eddie's, who is still with us, by the way, Jason Becker, who suffers from ALS. And I canceled vacation for my wife's 30th birthday. We were going to go away to an island, but they asked me to stay back in Chicago and host this show. And when Eddie found out what I did, he said, hey, I'm going to name the band after you for it. So they called it the Lou Brutus Experience. It's a lot more involved of a story, and there'll be more deets in the chapter, but that's another one that'll definitely go in.
Have you had any more recent time with Eddie at all?
No. I didn't want to be that guy. Hey, you named a band after me. Can I come backstage? Because I didn't have any direct business with him.
Somebody we know.
What's that? Say again?
Like somebody we know.
But
he's talking about me.
Oh, why? What happened?
Nothing.
No, that's my MO.
He would definitely do that.
Me?
He'd 100% do that. You get the Jason Levasseur Experience. Hi, here I am.
Yeah. Come backstage. Yeah,
Please name it after me.
I would have liked to have seen him again. And I just did a nice long form interview with Wolfgang, with Wolfie Van Halen for hardDrive and hardDrive XL. And he and I think, I know for a fact, we met sort of professionally when he was on that Mark Tremonti tour for the first time, as that was a hardDrive live tour that was sponsored by my show. And Wolf was called in to play in the band at the last minute via, I think, Tremonti called somebody in Seven Dust, may have been Morgan Rose, and Wolf was in Jersey with Morgan at that. It's sort of a long involved story. Yep. But I know I saw him on that tour, but I think he and I met when he was just a little kid and I was backstage broadcasting from Van Halen shows. Van Halen back in the day, even though they were the biggest band in the world at that time, they were awesome to radio. When they came into town, they did all the radio station interviews and visits and backstage meet and greets, and they were extremely accessible, which certainly helped Van Halen, but it also, it helped all these great rock stations around the country. And sometimes I don't know that all rock stars do as much of that as they could. I think a great example of an artist and their radio genre stations having sort of a symbiotic relationship goes back to the 1990s when, country artist, sorry, name tip of my tongue. Name some big country artists.
Garth, the 90s.
Go ahead, Steve. You know
Garth
them all.
Brooks.
Tim.
Garth Brooks. He was Garth Brooks. Garth Brooks, when he was blowing up, he could have just rested on his laurels. He really treated country radio very, very well. And on his off days from tour, he would be on the bus with, an early portable phone, cold calling radio stations, country stations around the country, and not just the great big radio stations. He was calling, Froggy 101 in, bumfuck Tennessee. And, he would go on the air with these DJs and stuff. And, it certainly helped his sales and it helped his concert tickets, but it also helped all of these country stations all around the country. Even some small stations like, oh my God, Garth Brooks was on with the DJ today. And the DJ, he's friends with Garth Brooks. And it just makes the radio stations look and sound good. Yep. And that was part of the reason, I think, anyway, for the explosion of country radio back then. It was the real sort of handcrafted relationships between Garth Brooks and all of these radio stations around the U.S. Pretty amazing stuff. But again, back to the point, Van Halen was very much like that back in the 1990s on those Sammy Hagar tours and all those great records.
Our venue is a big in the country music, and they're very tight in Nashville. And I've said all along that if it wasn't for Garth Brooks, all of this bro country stuff that we see out there now wouldn't exist, because he's the one that got everything going in that direction.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, without question. Both the good and the bad. I think,
I agree.
You know, I mean, personally, when I don't listen to a lot of country music, I do prefer sort of the old timey stuff like Marty Robbins, songs like El Paso or Water or Big Iron, another great sort of cowboy tune from Marty Robbins. And those tunes, interestingly enough, I did not originally learn from the country artists. I learned them via the Grateful Dead. The Grateful Dead, particularly Bobby Weir, would perform these songs. El Paso was in the Grateful Dead's repertoire for decades. Bobby also on I think the first Kingfish album, which was one of his side projects, covered Big Iron. But El Paso, they would sometimes do like 25 minute versions of it, as only the Grateful Dead could. But yeah, they always loved that country Western stuff. And it was a big influence on albums like Working Man's Dead and to maybe a little bit lesser of an extent, American Beauty.
Can we backtrack to some of the technical stuff of the book? You did your own audio for the audio book, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I listen to a lot of different podcasts, and a lot of the different guys have their own books, and they all talk about the same thing, of how the publishing company has somebody do the reading of the book for them, and then later on they become big enough so they can go back and get the rights back and do the book themselves. How did you manage to get that done up front so it was just yours?
Well, the publisher reached part of the deal. I've got a lit agent, and the lit agent sends the sample chapters out to the publishers, and the publishers respond back, and you go back and forth. And, part of the understanding the entire time was, hey, when we do an audiobook, it would only make sense for me to do. They're my stories. I'm a professional announcer. I talk for a living. These are essentially written versions of stories I've been saying out loud for decades. So this is probably the best example, or a very good example of a book that should be narrated by its author. But initially they were going to get somebody else, but I didn't take it as a slight against me. It was just the audio company going, yeah, we always get narrators. Authors never do this stuff themselves. They just assumed. And we immediately, went back and said, hey, fellas, maybe Lou should read this. And they were like, oh, duh. Yeah, of course. So, I cut it over the course of, I think 3 days in New York. Was it late last year or very early this year? I think it was very early this year. I forget the timeline of it, but I just went up to New York for a few days and did not bring my maybe I brought one camera. Normally when I go to New York, I bring a couple of cameras, and I like to wander around all night and just get pictures of whatever I can find. Man. However, I was really afraid of staying out late and, getting sick, which would have been bad for the reading. So I thought, and I'm going to hole up mostly in the hotel and, eat lozenges, so it wasn't my usual New York trip, I'm afraid.
Hey, thanks for watching part 1 of our interview with Lou Brutus. Make sure you go check out his book and check out hardDrive Radio as well. For our guests, go to our YouTube channel or talesfromthepit.net. Till then, we'll see you next time.